Welcome to the Underground Podcast in conjunction with Underground RX Strength and Conditioning. Hi there guys, and welcome to the podcast. Today I'm going to be interviewing Aaron Davis, who's a sports scientist from Dallas, Texas. And I know Aaron pretty well. He used to do my programming and coach me back in 2014. And ever since then I've always loved what he's done and followed what he's done. And because he's so far in the field of sports science, with a really strong crossover to CrossFit, there's a lot of interest in what he does. And so today's interview was meant to go for 20 minutes, but it actually ended up going for almost an hour. There's heaps of great content, and it actually gets better the further we sort of loosen up and just start talking about the CrossFit and the strength and conditioning world. So I would like to get Aaron to now introduce himself.
Aaron Davis. I am the owner of Train Adapt Evolve, and I work with all sorts of different athletes, from CrossFit to American football players, and do a little sports science consulting on the side and a lot of health consulting. Kind of a jack of all trades. Master of none, probably.
Cool. So obviously we've known each other for 4 years now, and you were doing my programming back in the day. Whenever, I obviously look up to you on a lot of things, and your knowledge blows my mind. That's why I wanted to talk to you about stuff. And the main thing I wanted to talk about, on a level that obviously you're a geek, I'm a wannabe geek, and so I want to try and cross that bridge between the people who don't know the lingo and really what's happening at that cellular level, to the people that are just wanting to know how to get fitter. So I guess the question was, specifically I wanted to talk to you about was, is training strength, for example, counterproductive to training aerobic endurance? And in CrossFit, obviously we train everything. Are you doing something that's counterproductive to, what you're doing the next day of the week? Is there a better way to do it? And sort of what are your thoughts and opinions on all of that?
Yeah, that's kind of like a loaded question, because it just really depends on the athlete, right? And the sport. But let's say just for CrossFit's sake, considering that's like everything, I would say that, there are studies that say it conflicts, right? But ultimately, I think if you're smart on the endurance side, in other words, as long as you're not running, so in other words, you can swim, I think you can bike, row, airdyne, any other stuff that's kind of non-impact, you can get away with it. There's no doubt. And you can build muscle mass, and you can get really freaking strong. And there are kind of little tricks of the trade to when to do what when, But I think for the most part, for CrossFitters, you have to be doing it all the time. You can't just say, hey, I want to do endurance block, or I want to do a strength block. The body just wants to keep those channels open the whole time. Once you close off one channel, that's when you've kind of sacrificed the adaptation to the other.
So say you've got a well-balanced athlete. They're strong, they're fit. This is for CrossFit standards. They move well. Yeah. Are you saying, most likely the best way to sort of move forward then is do CrossFit? Just do everything all the time? Or would you still go, well, wait a minute, we'd be better off going, let's do 4 weeks of solid strength training, really get some strength goals, maybe keep the heart and lungs ticking over once or twice a week? Or would you go, no, let's do strength in the morning, some muscle endurance work around lunch, and some cardio in the evening, and as long as they're recovering as an individual fine, then that's fine?
Yeah, I'd say it's going to be kind of very similar to that in a sense. I think all pieces are still going to be in play. It's just you're moving the volume up and down throughout the season, right? Maybe early in the season, you're doing a lot of that type of work where it's more maybe strength-based or bodybuilding-based. And then you're just doing kind of cyclical pieces, which is just mostly just, the aerobic stuff without the, I guess, mixed modal stuff involved, right? And then as the season progresses, you're kind of blending the two throughout the year. I'm taking a little bit different stuff now personally. The stuff I'm doing now, I'm just hitting it right off the get-go. So we're just going all in right from the start.
Because what you mentioned before is my mindset at the moment is kind of build the foundation in each area. So like get as strong as hell, build up some crazy muscle endurance, get aerobically as good as possible, and become efficient in multiple, like every movement you can imagine, move well. And then the further you get through the season to competition, start blending it. So start putting, not just practicing the movement, but more volume, and then getting your strength with a bit of, aerobic stuff mixed in. And then almost like 8 weeks out, just start doing CrossFit. Just condition the shit out of the person for the competition. And maybe that's a mindset that maybe I need to change. So tell me more about what you do now. Like you said, go all in from the get-go, and why you've chosen that sort of view.
I think I've done that just in the sense that, like, I think in the past I've probably broken things apart too much. And what we don't understand sometimes, unless you have, I would say, some of this kind of biometric data, like maybe Omega Wave or the HRV, or you're really doing a good job of kind of testing the athlete's physical abilities along the way. You don't know, by the time you get done with one block and you start the other, you don't know with that second block how they're going to adapt to. Some people might adapt really fast and everything can come together at the right time, and you might have like an awesome stud on your hands that's going to perform very well. But I've noticed with more maybe just the average population of CrossFitters trying to get to that elite level, that once I start separating things and then all of a sudden putting it back together, like they need a little bit more time. They need more time to adapt. And so right now I'm just going all in. I work in like 2 weeks kind of cycles. And so the first maybe like 8 days of the 14 days, we are strength training and metcons and kind of cyclical pieces maybe too mixed in there, especially I guess in the beginning of the year, but we're kind of going all in. And then after the 8 days of that 14-week period, the last, say, 4 workouts or 3 workouts is very aerobic based. And I have recovery strategies mixed up in the last 3, those 3 workouts at the very end to deliver nutrients and for them to recover quicker by the time we reboot for the next 2-week cycle. And then I just layer that on, and over the year, we're just looking to try to improve quality and intensity in that in those workouts as we go through.
Benchmark workouts that you test and retest every 8 weeks, or do you do the same ones every 2 weeks? Like how do you know they're getting fitter? What are your key indications?
Yeah, it's going to be kind of weird. So I usually use one workout modality almost every week. And so that gives me a kind of an idea of what's going on. And it's literally, if it's on an Airdyne, it might be 10 seconds worth of work. They have 1 minute rest. I tell them to go for as long as possible until I see a 10% decrease in power output, and the athlete has to really be in tune with their body to do this, but until their breathing is overcompensated. So in other words, they start hyperventilating, or their heart rate shoots through the roof, or the power, like I said before, doesn't match up to their kind of 10% zone that I want them to stay in. And when I first have athletes do this, they might last 15 rounds. And I think now a couple of 5+ rounds at the same watt ranges that they were when they first started. Right. So, and I have that in all year. So that's in all year with different modalities, and I just want to see what's going on there.
It's easy on an assault bike, right? You've got the wattage, you can measure things, you can probably do it on a rower. What other modalities can you do it with, and have an accurate 10% sort of range?
Yeah, I would say some of it though is like ski erg. too. But then also I've been doing, maybe it's the Airdyne plus a lightweight snatch, and they do an Airdyne and then rest a minute, and they do maybe 10, 75 pound or, forgot the kilos, but 75 pound, snatches, touch and go type stuff. And I just wait for them to give me their kind of physical responses to that. Like, how long can you go before, I'd say I always look at it this way. It's either your muscle's going to quit, your heart's going to compensate, or your respiratory is going to compensate. Those are your limiters in performance. And so whatever your limiter is, I want to know what that is that day. And then often or not, you'll start hearing people say, oh, well, my respiration, I just felt like I couldn't breathe. I couldn't get enough O2 in. And then you realize what their limiter is. It's their breathing. And then that's what you have to look up.
There's one, we're talking about, we're not talking about strength here. We're talking about endurance, aerobic endurance, or anaerobic as well, or mainly aerobic?
Yeah, it's going to be mostly aerobic because the one thing. So I use that Moxy monitor. That was my second thing. So Moxy monitor. So Moxy monitor is able to look at oxygen in the muscle, in the working muscle. So it just sends out an infrared light, and there's another light sensor that picks up the oxygenated hemoglobin in the blood, in the muscle, and it sees blood volume going to the muscle, and then also oxygen being extracted by the muscle in the working muscle. So at the end of the day, I don't necessarily, I don't think the classical ideas of if truth is possible, right? Because if we think about it from the classical sense, you're not supposed to be aerobic till, 2 minutes. Yeah, right? But when you put it on a Moxy monitor...
Brain that quickly?
I would say on max stuff, no. I'm doing stuff, say squats that are really, really heavy. And then power cleans is going to be mostly...
So the Moxy monitor and what you're talking about now, like you said, it's all very aerobic based. If you how do you go then about measuring your athletes? When you say you're all in, it's like, no, we just do conditioning. There's no isolated strength work.
Whatever conditioning pieces we might have that day. I just think it can't always just be aerobic and strength training. Like I used to kind of always do that. Now I feel like there might always need to be everything in, because for me, it's like, I want it to be very intense for 2 weeks or for say 8 days. And then I want to recover them, and then intense, recover, intense, recover. I never want intensity to go bye-bye. And so people might think I'm crazy because the frequency of work is pretty high, but on the backside of that second week, they generally recover pretty quick, right? And so I would say that we're always looking at, is strength going up week to week? That's always a big factor. What things technique-wise are we having trouble with within the strength realm? Is coordination issue? Is the gymnastic stuff an issue? And we're always kind of putting those and piecing those in together. But I would say, maybe taking away pieces as we get closer to the CrossFit, maybe open, right? So maybe we're kind of just maintaining strength, through the CrossFit Open. But
this is just a pure example. 60-minute assault bike session, just max calories, let's say, but every 2 minutes, a 2 back squat at 90% or 85%, 90%. So you're sort of training aerobically. The gist of it is will the cells in your body...
Yeah, I would say that like from a classical trained, say, sports scientist, he would say that I think that there are, I think there's just benefits to that type of work within CrossFit, to be honest. From the cellular level, I can kind of see, as long as they're not maybe hauling ass during the 60-minute, I'm sure, granted, they're probably still going halfway decent. Tolerance, probably maybe closer to the CrossFit season. I would say that if you want somebody to be really strong, I don't know if that would be the intervention I would use. But I would say that coming in to, even in the Open, was it 2 years ago where you had a huge Metcon and you had to go back and try to find a heavy clean and jerk, right? That trains that ability to do it. And who would have ever thought of putting all that shit together other than CrossFit, right? So you you have to train it, and so I would think a piece like that would be something that, would maybe build tolerance to something.
So with your view on CrossFit, I mean, it's a very strange sport. It's like, it baffles a lot of sports scientists, because they're like, they might, like you say, football you work with, or rugby if you're from down under, and it's like, it's very specific what's required, right? And you can periodize and train for it. So does the CrossFit model to you, does it really change your idea of periodization if you're working on a CrossFit athlete? Or is it just a different style of the same periodization?
Yeah, I think it's just a different style of the same periodization. I think even with my other athletes, we work on everything at all times a year. Like, we never drop off one thing or the other. We might move volumes around, right? And the intensities might be a little bit different. But at the end of the day, like, we're always working strength. We're always working some kind of aerobic piece. And we're just kind of phasing one in, phasing one out a little bit as we go through the year. And I think it's the same thing with CrossFit. It's, yeah, I mean, I really do. I think the same thing. I think CrossFit lends to different weaknesses that we have to be aware of. Like a football player, excuse me, we're not looking, I'm not too concerned if they're going to have a respiratory limitation, right? Because they're not going to be doing work that long. Whereas a CrossFitter, I think respiratory limitation is literally the single most limiter for all CrossFitters across the board. And it allows me to see CrossFitters as like a math problem now.
Carry on, yeah.
Right? So I have another device I use called the Spiro Tiger, and it helps train the breathing muscles. Yeah, and so if you look at it this way, say you have two guys that are 5'10", they're both in gymnastics, their aerobic abilities are very similar. Well, I guess I can't really say similar, but let's say at least strength is very similar. And you put them in a CrossFit, like, who's going to win, right? I think the person who's going to win is whoever has the best ability to vaguely figure out how many liters per minute they can breathe out. And so if we think of the normal human being able to breathe out between like 80 to like 120 liters per minute, right? And like, say, Tour de France riders are around 250, right? I want to make sure that all my CrossFitters I work with are closer to 200. Okay? But if you look at the Fronings, the Matt Frasers, even the good females, everybody, right? Like, watch them breathe. They're able to, like, breathe out more per minute than somebody else, right? And here's the math problem. If you have muscle, like more active muscle, you're going to have more hydrogen ions. So hydrogen ions, right? We always think lactate is bad, but lactate grabs the hydrogen ions out of your cells, they put them in your blood, and it goes into CO2, and you breathe it out. So if you have more active muscle, that means you're going to produce more hydrogen ions. That means you have to be able to breathe them out. So you put on all this muscle mass, you want them to run like they do in CrossFit, or you want them to do a long Metcon or whatever else. If they can't breathe it out, then they're always going to fall short. And so you have to work on the breathing.
Okay. And do you, to the point of you get guys breathing isolated as you would get them squat isolated, as you would to get them... Do you sit people down and say, right, breathe into this bag? You know what I mean?
Pretty much, yeah. Because this is the thing about what I love, what I get to do. So I just signed on to do kind of sports science stuff for a good CrossFit here in Austin. And it's nice because I can step away and just have the athlete. Well, I think CrossFit in general is very good at like keep on adding more and more. Like these athletes are like, well, I need a row coach. I need a swim coach. I need a ollie lifting coach, right? And all these coaches aren't talking. They're just, the athlete's just doing this breathing for, let's say, 4 by 5 minutes at, 30 breaths. Now their muscles can pretty much recover, and I can...
CrossFit athlete. Do you then go, right, we're just going to drop everything? Say someone's just piss weak. Say you get a triathlete come to you who is very coordinated and they can pick up the movements very well, but they are just piss weak. Do you go, we're going to and they want to go regionals, right? And you go, we're going to spend 12 months. Wait. Or do you go all in again but just tailor it to strength pieces?
Yeah, I'd say I'd go all in, but tailor it to strength. I would probably have a serious talk with them to see what their actual goals are, though. A triathlete that comes in that you maybe saw the CrossFit Games on ESPN or something, right? And they're all hyped thinking they're going to make it. I'm all like, okay, we might need to talk about this a little bit, right? But yeah, I'd still probably go all in. But I still need to get them in the fire a little bit,
Yeah, cool. Well, that's what I wanted to find out about. Yeah, does certain stresses and certain responses in the body to stress sort of override other ones, or are they counterproductive? And what I kind of got from you is that no. And that is quite an old school mentality that, training one thing will slow down the other one. You said with the exception of running and the impact, what sort of made you say that?
Yeah, just looking at, so we think of it in the sense of, the eccentric pounding, right, on running is usually pretty tough. And just from probably maybe an evolutionary standpoint, I think our bodies are used to going from point A to point B with a light load when we're running a lot. And for most CrossFitters, I think our job is to try to keep on as much usable muscle mass as possible to keep them as strong as possible. And so if we can limit some of the pounding, I think that's a big key. I think also, just tailoring the workouts, maybe the aerobic pieces in the morning, and then you recover them really well with the nutritional stuff or whatever else, then you hit them with the strength piece at night. And then if you want a more, let's say, coordination, then maybe all these stuffs in the morning when their nervous system might be more fresh.
Jesus, don't talk to me in the morning, I'll still be asleep, but yep, carry on.
Obviously, yeah, you got to kind of tailor it to the athlete, but I think there's just different ways to arrange things throughout an athlete's day.
Yep. Cool. Can you just tell me a little bit now, and we'll wrap it up, just about the technology you use? So we've talked a little bit about the Moxy, and that measures the oxygen within the individual muscle and how much is in there, how it's being used, how long it takes to replenish, all that stuff. But you also work with HRV, you work with Omega Wave, and you were talking about the DC outputs. And can you just talk to me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I have a Omega Wave system. It's a team system. And so this allows me to see a very low electrical brainwave. It's called the DC potential from the forehead. And actually you have it all through your body. And probably back when we were going through evolution, it was this electrical current actually helped regenerate our cells and heal us. And even now, it still does that, but just to a far, far, far lesser extent. But it's probably more accurate than the HRV. So when I see some of these DC potential either go erratic or go really low, like in millivolts, I know that person's probably under some stress. And so I get that from the Omega Wave. I also get standard HRV, and I get all parameters of HRV. So both kind of all the Russian values and all what kind of we use here in America. And it's allowing me to see kind of metabolism, their parasympathetic, sympathetic, drivers. And then even with using the DC potential, it actually kind of screens hormonal issues, lung issues, detox issues. And that way I kind of have this nice dashboard of that person. And if something pops up red, like in a car, then I know I need to fix it. And if it's more on the hormonal side, then I usually try to look at blood work, looking at blood labs to see what's going on there. If it's the lungs that are popping up weird, then we're on the Spirotiger, right? Or we're looking at allergies or nutritional stuff. And if it's detox, then we're also looking at nutritional stuff there or hydration. And so it just kind of gives me this kind of 360 degree look at all my athletes. It's nice.
I love that stuff as well. And I guess the thing I struggle with, and other people probably look at and struggle with, is did Rich Froning use it all? No. Did Matt Fraser? No. Do all the top people? No. And it's like, could they be better if they did? Or like, is it super critical? Is it that relevant? Or do you just enjoy getting these people as healthy as possible? Like, why, and I don't mean this to be rude, but why haven't you got, 3 athletes at the games with all this technology and all this knowledge? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I would say this, that I played a lot with different CrossFit protocols, right? Like, so especially when I was still at CrossFit Austin, I was just experimenting. Like, I was just doing stuff just to kind of like a mad scientist, right? I just wanted to see what would work and what didn't work. I found out that a lot of the stuff I was doing at the time didn't work,
yeah.
Right? But I was trying to use a Russian researcher whose name's Viktor Selinov, his work. And I was like, well, everybody talks about his work being the best. Well, let me take 20 athletes and let me see his work. And I'm going to use it all for the programming. And, it sucked, right? But now I look at using the Omegawave and all this technology stuff, in essence, to try to just more tailor the program within CrossFit to that athlete, right? And I think now that I'm kind of stepping back into CrossFit a little bit, just more from a consulting side, I am much better now than I was back then at seeing limiters, right? And I think the biggest thing with athletes now and training them is, are you driving a functional adaptation or a structural adaptation? I look at those two as in functional means, hey, the body's kind of in this alarm state. It's like, holy shit, I need to put on muscle, or I need to do this really quick so I can get good at it, so I can survive, right? And then you have this structural adaptation, which is built over time, and it might be muscle, bone, the lungs, or the respiratory muscles, the heart, but that can actually handle the volume of CrossFit. The functional side is stressed out internally, trying to do the work, and those people don't last long, okay? And so now I've kind of structured my stuff now as like, okay, I'm going to use this stuff to get the structural adaptation so I keep them healthy enough so that they can maybe get better throughout their CrossFit careers or athletic careers, where before I was probably like, I get them good now, maybe. And I was looking at the Omegawave stuff, but I had no idea what their limiter was. And I was just driving a car blindly. And now I think it's going to be interesting here this next year working with this team because, we'll just see. It'll be fun.
Cool. It's funny you say that because I was explaining it to someone yesterday that there's training age, right? There's just something about the maturity of someone who's been training for a long time, like training properly for a long time, that you can't substitute. You can't get any other way. And like, I'll use myself as an example. I really don't train that much anymore, maybe a couple of times a week, but I've been doing it for the last 15, 20 years through the military, bodybuilding, everything. And I could still go in and do a workout now and do really, really, really well. And it's just, I don't know what it is, but my body's just matured. It's used to it. And like you said, I see people that have this, was it the functional adaptation, which is very short term? Was that the transient one, kind of comes and goes? I see so many people with that. And I don't think it's healthy, and a lot of CrossFitters do it, and it's not healthy, and they might be good. And I say there's like a 3-year life cycle in CrossFit. People just come flying in and flying out, and that they aren't the athletes I want to build. And I tell my guys that right from the start that slow and steady does win the race. But I guess you've put it into words, and you've probably got a better understanding of it. The only way I could explain it to this person yesterday was training age and maturity. There's some form of maturity that goes into the body over time, which you can't get quickly.
Yeah. And I'd say even on like the Rich Froning and Matt Fraser stuff, right? Like, what do you think they're better at everybody else at? I think they're better breathers. They can breathe more liters per minute. And so that means they can do whatever the hell they want because they're probably always delivering O2 to the muscles and they're always getting CO2 out, right? And so it allows them to be able to kind of be, at least from our perspective, like, hell, they can do whatever they want and get away with it, right? But because of their maybe intrinsic talent, right, which is probably respiration. And same thing with why Matt Frazier, I think most people when they're like, well, Matt Frazier just did a bunch of aerobic work. He won the games, right? Well, you took a good breather, right? And you just then put probably a little bit more mitochondria on the muscle. Now he can deliver more O2 to the muscle. He can go for longer. Boom, done. But somebody else who has a respiratory limitation, which most CrossFitters do, mostly because, one, they fatigue it really fast, right? They're doing high-intensity stuff all the time. And the muscles that actually are used to breathe, well, they fatigue. And then, two, their posture. A lot of times they're in a very overextended posture where they're breathing right up in their neck and then their chest, right? And if you look at Rich Froning breathe, it's right in his stomach and diaphragm. It's like a machine, right? So he's not really ever using extra muscle or extra energy to breathe like most other CrossFitters, right? They're like, you look like violin. Yeah, they look like they have like violin strings for net, right? Like they really
Sam Bailey, good example. Very like
exactly. Yeah, and that's why I think it's hard, right? You can only push the muscular side so much, and then the body's like, well, hey, you have to deliver O2. If you're not delivering O2, it doesn't matter how strong we are or how much muscle endurance we have. Oxygen is your main player. And so I think those guys can do literally whatever they want because their breathing is so good.
Is staying relaxed, like mentally relaxed, focused in the zone, also hand in hand with that? Like you're going to deplete a lot more oxygen being, let's say, stressed and, I don't know, like is it chicken or egg? If you hyperventilate, do you use, like, does that fuck you up? Or are you fucked up so you start to hyperventilate?
Well, I think it's two things. You can train athletes to hyperventilate, or what we perceive as hyperventilating, and they can be calm, right? But a lot of times, if you don't train that, and they don't realize it, and like realize how they can actually manipulate their breathing, right, to use it for performance, then their brain gets in, and they're like, "Oh man, we're hyperventilating, we're in trouble, we're freaking stressed," right? But I think it's all trainable. Actually, I know it's trainable. So it's my job now is to train people to almost play their breathing, almost like it's just another thing they can like tweak now to gain performance on another person. And if we look at why people quit, it's because they don't unload O2. They can't get O2 in. And a lot of that's the science of breathing. There's like hyperventilation and hypoventilation. When we do exercising to like high intensities, we're actually not breathing enough. So we actually need to breathe out the CO2 much faster than we do. And most people just, unfortunately, they hyperventilate, but they actually just breathe out dead space air in their esophagus, right here in their neck. And they're not really getting O2 in or CO2 out. And that's why they have to stop. So,
okay. I know I said this would only probably take 20 minutes and it's been like 10 hours, but one last thing. So with this breathing, like
sure.
do you say in the nose, out the mouth? Like for me, I'm like in the mouth, out the mouth. It might be dead space. I don't know. But have you got something that's like, this is the way it should be? Or is it still kind of like, it doesn't matter as long as this is happening, you know?
Well, I think once you're when you're into the deep waters that CrossFit is going to put you there, I think mouth breathing is the way to go. You're going to probably most of the time have to always be there. But it's more of like how strong are your respiratory muscles? Like what's your respiratory muscle endurance when that happens? A lot of times, say if it's a 12-minute workout, people's respiratory muscles trying to deal with the work being done, they're not strong enough, nor do they have the endurance enough to last the whole workout. So you'll start seeing them fatigue, and then maybe they're blowing out really well early on, but then now their respiratory muscles fatigue, and now they're only blowing out half of what they used to, right? And then that's literally what's making them fatigue.
So by training the diaphragm, by training the like intercostal, like is that gonna? You're saying if we can train those individual muscles, almost in a way of like building the muscle endurance of a push-up, for example, same principles, that's going to increase performance.
Without a doubt.
Amazing. Like, how often do you see stuff like that program for people? You know, breathing drills to increase their breathing endurance.
I would say that, like, I would say everybody now that I'm going to be working with will. So this CrossFit team that I'll be working with, it'll be a marker like the snatch or the back squat. I'm going to see what they are when I first get there and test them. And then by the time they get Yep. And then by the time they get to the open, I have a goal in my head where I want all of them to be. And it's going to be interesting because there's a couple of them that are going to be very good in the region. And so it's going to be neat to see now, coming back into CrossFit, what actually makes a CrossFitter good. I think nobody really knows. I mean, a couple people say breathing before, but now I'll have metrics. And then I'm just going to improve those metrics as we get closer and closer. I think, though, at least in my heart of heart, I think this is probably the missing piece. I can probably make average CrossFitters
good
competitive.
Yeah.
We'll see. It's not, you can have a podcast with me next year and I can just be full of shit again.
And then you can have tell me about your new idea.
I'll probably just drop CrossFit. Yeah.
No, that's awesome, man. And like I said at the start, I look up to you. I pretty much, I'm like, I have mentors, right? And you're one of them, in this industry. And like what you've talked about now, I'm going to go and look into more. I let you do the hardcore research, and then I just go, so what's the summary? And then you tell me the summary, and I go and play with it, right? And always give you credit. I think all of my athletes that I coach know about you and know my roots have come sort of, and I follow what you do. So, yeah, I just want to say thank you, not just for today, but for everything. I really, really appreciate what you teach me and what you're teaching everyone else.
Yeah, man, we got to get you up to the States one of these days.
I know. Well, I'm going to Hawaii and Canada next year, and I've talked, because I coach a girl in Miami, I've talked about going to Miami. You're right down the bottom, hey? Dallas, Texas, in the middle.
Yep.
I do need to, without a word of a lie. I just have to time it.
Okay, good. It's on podcast now, so I'm going to hold you to it.
I'll edit it. Nah. Cool, man. Well, yeah, thanks once again. And I guess, is there any last words before we say goodbye?
No. Thank you for having me on. Appreciate it.
Awesome, Marion. Thanks for your time.
I mean...